This week on our AMP America Week in Review, we uncover how Trump's campaign completely rewrote the rules of American politics. But first, Charlie Kirk reveals the revolutionary strategy that helped deliver a landslide victory, and why the old Republican playbook is officially dead. Plus, the real reason Democrats are now asking themselves, were we too right? The answer might shock you. Get ready for the inside story they don't want you to hear. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. Well, happy Saturday there, folks. Brian Nichols here on another fun-filled episode of the Brian Nichols Show, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios. And yes, it's Saturday, which means it's time for our AMP America Week in Review. First, we're going to talk about the question that a lot of Democrats are asking. Were we too right? I don't think they're really asking that question too much, but that's an article written over in Politico. We're going to check that out. Plus, a great conversation with Charlie Kirk, Chris Cuomo, and Patrick Bet-David over on the PBD podcast. Charlie Kirk going through what the Republicans were able to do to secure such an amazing ground game to bring Donald Trump not only over the top, but to really put away a lot of question marks that would be going into the election. And then later, we're going to wrap up with a great article written by our good friend Austin Peterson over at AMP America. Does the Liberty Movement have new torchbearers? And are those torchbearers in folks like Elon Musk? We're going to talk about that and more. And I can't do this myself. So joining us here on our AMP America Week in Review, Editor-in-Chief, Remso W. Martinez. Welcome back to the program, buddy. You're back from PA. How are you?
Tired.
I bet you've been a little busy there, Remso. Now, for folks playing along in the home game, last week it was a solo episode. I went through why Trump won, and elephant in the room was a lot of the reasons Remso and I had been talking about here leading up to the election. But Remso, you were out there in Pennsylvania over the past week as Trump was securing that victory, and then all the ensuing aftermath. So talk to us, man. What's been going on in the world of Remso Martinez besides being very tired?
It was a late flight Monday, the day before the election. Tuesday was all day in the war room in Pennsylvania. And then it was, stuck at the Philly airport for 8 hours on Wednesday before I had to go ahead and take a AM flight to Virginia on Thursday to help some stuff out with my parents. So it's been quite a bit. And, it was one of those situations where I was talking to Cliff Maloney. We were about to drive somewhere late Monday night, and he asked me, "So you think we win this thing?" And I was like, "You don't ever want to say an answer that you yourself don't believe, because in the tone of your voice, for people like me who are bad liars, it comes out pretty obviously." But I was like, "I think we do." How though? I don't know, but I think we do. And it was a weird gut feeling. And it was a situation where it was like, we've put in the work, we've done everything necessary. And I'm not just talking about the PA chase, but I'm talking about what the folks at Turning Point Action did, what Scott Pressler's early vote action did. It was grassroots conservatives that actually won the day. And yeah, the RNC was great at tossing lawyers at people, but it's more like they should have done that.
Yep.
But we went ahead and actually secured the victory. The PA Chase went ahead and promised that we'd knock on 500,000 doors and we'd secure 33% Republican mail-in ballot vote. Instead, we went ahead and knocked 510,000 doors and we secured 34.5% of the total mail-in vote for Republicans. And we delivered Pennsylvania. And it was a situation where it was just like, the past 4 years, it was the equivalent of, I don't know, like in Avengers Endgame when they bring back everybody and
all at once, the big battle,
and people can kind of figure stuff out, and it's like life returns back to as normal as possible. But it was like, it feels like I can breathe again. It feels like I can breathe again. It feels like the past 4 years have been in some bizarro world nightmare where the snap happened. And now it's like, the Avengers got together. We won after, a lot of hard work, a lot of behind the scenes stuff. And, the PA Chase team, who I'd been working with for some time, it was the perfect coalition of the right people at the right time in the right place for the right moment.
Yeah.
And flying back to Wisconsin from Pennsylvania, it felt surreal. It felt surreal to see that we actually helped deliver Donald Trump the White House through Pennsylvania. And then, as I was seeing throughout the rest of the night, because I literally Tuesday morning, I brought my luggage with me to the office that we were working out of. And they were like, you're already checking out? I'm like, dude, I'm going straight from here to the airport. I am here until we get every last state in. And as soon as they basically called Arizona around 3:30-ish a.m., we were all looking for the hockey puck moment. And then we were like, oh, shit. Like,
there's no hockey stick. It's too big to rig.
This was too big to rig. Overwhelming majority. They're contesting it in like Wisconsin, where a whole bunch of Milwaukee votes have suddenly turned out, but they're only affecting the Senate race for Tammy Baldwin.
Bucks County.
They're trying to go after Bucks County, and people are like, what does this mean for Trump? It actually doesn't mean anything for Trump. What it will do is it will impact the McCormick. They're actively trying to steal a race before our eyes.
By the way, like right there, that's the thing we got to make sure we point out here. Yeah. All the critiques, all the accusations leveled over the past 4 years against Republicans, against Trump trying to steal an election, actually more than 4 years. Let's go back to 2015, 2016, right? So almost 10 years at this point. Mm-hmm. Now we're watching right now as Democrats are literally following the exact playbook that they accused Republicans of following over this time frame. It's so revealing, Remso, how full of shit, pardon my language to start things out within less than 10 minutes here, but like how full of shit the predominant left, we're going to say, the Democratic Party really is when it comes to, they will make an accusation which isn't true against the other side, and then internally they are doing the exact thing they are accusing the other team of doing.
Well, as Joe Biden once said, our patience is waning thin. And,
thanks, Dr. Biden's husband.
Yeah.
Dr. Jill Biden.
It's one of those situations where it's just like, we're going to sue you. We'll put you in prison. Like, we will name and shame forever, because this is just where we're at. Like, they can't just admit defeat. And this wasn't like, 2016, where it's like, narrow margins, House and Senate, narrow margins, state houses across the country, narrow margins, gubernatorial elections. Trump wins the Electoral College, but they still call it out because he didn't win the popular vote. This was an overwhelmingly positive year for Republicans. Republicans, I don't think historically have ever had a mandate like they do now, even compared to like the Reagan or Nixon eras. What we're going to see now, and especially with the cabinet appointments and everything, is that they realistically have 1 year. And I say 1 year. They have 1 year to do whatever they want, because as soon as 2026 hits, everyone goes into fundraising mode.
Yep.
And as soon as the 2026 midterms end, we will immediately start the process of the next presidential election cycle, which, as I say it out loud, I feel sick to my stomach thinking about it, because it's a clean slate. Largely with Trump and with everything this past cycle, a lot of the momentum was still kind of there. A lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the knowledge, a lot of talking points, a lot of the ground game was already there, and it was being built up. So that way, when he did secure the nomination in July, there was really no guessing when it came to things. Who knows who's going to be his successor? Who knows, who the Democrats are going to try and stick up? I think it'll say more about the Democrats than it will about Trump, because whoever will run as the Republican nominee they can't run away from Trump now. Whereas you had like the Haleys and even DeSantis to a large degree that were trying to, play left of Trump on stuff. Like, we need to move on. It's like, no, like whoever runs has to say, I am running to simply continue the Trump era for 4 to 8 years. So we have 12 consecutive years of a strong Republican government, which is why I think we need to, correct a large amount of the bullshit that's happened. But what the Democrats do in terms of picking their nominee will say more about whether they paid attention or not.
Preach. And Really,
Yeah.
really quick, Remso. That is a phenomenal transition to our first topic today, right? And this is an article over at Politico, and the caption is, or the title is, "Democrats wonder, are we too correct?" Right now, it's not what you're thinking about, listener and viewer. But rather, there's really 5 pieces to this article. First is an actual critique of identity politics, and I'm just going to quickly, run through this. It's a critique of identity politics. You have members of what we would call like the Democratic establishment, and they're saying right now, listen, y'all, we completely missed the vibe on the ground. We focused way too much on who the voter was versus looking at, well, maybe the identity-based politics is actually alienating voters, number one. Number two, it's now looking at finally an opportunity to reframe Democratic messaging, but is that enough? And we're going to talk about that in a second. The need for accessible language, and by accessible language, talking about how, you need to start talking about the words that actually matter to people based on the actual problems people experience and are facing. So when you're going out and calling Latino folks Latinx or Latinx doesn't really resonate, right? Recognizing that there's a very diverse voter group, and with that, very diverse voter priorities, right? So just because you are a white woman who's in their maybe mid-30s, maybe that doesn't mean that just because you're a white woman in your mid-30s, that abortion is your number one issue at all given times. And then to wrap it up, what does it mean for the future? Will the Democratic Party not just change their messaging, but change their actual strategies here? So this article over at Politico, definitely eye-opening. And as we're live here on X this morning, yes, we are live, by the way, folks, as you're popping in. Thank you for saying hello. But as we're going through this morning, Remso, are Democrats starting to wake up to the reality, right? What was this election the big slap in the face, right? Like the Mike Tyson slap to Jake Paul in the face.
Oh,
Topical, but is that because I did my election review episode last week when you were still going across the country back home. But when I did this overview, we shared 2 clips, Remso. One of the clips was over on CNN. I think the other one is on MSNBC. The first clip was where I forget the lady's name, Abby Phillips, I think, from CNN, where she was like asking this black panelist why the Democratic Party was missing the boat. He started saying, when you have boys playing in women's sports, and then one of the panelists, he's this lefty goofball, he jumps in, they're not boys, they are trans men, they are trans men, they are not boys, and this is hateful rhetoric. So he obviously doesn't get it. And then on the other side, there was a lady, and there's another lady, I forget which show it was, but she was saying, hey, when we're talking to voters, and they're telling me that the cost of groceries is too much, the cost of living is too much, and this very educated black professor sits back and he goes, I hear you, I just don't believe that, right? So I see those 2 examples of folks pretty much whistling past the proverbial graveyard here. That is Kamala Harris's campaign and the entire Democratic Party's establishment's hopes and dreams going into this past election. But Remso, does this article at least say that some of the folks behind the scenes are starting to wake up?
It was somebody on Kamala Harris's staff that said that if she went on Joe Rogan's podcast, that she would alienate progressive voters. And the real thing that they miss is that, they were not, quote, platforming Joe Rogan, as I think a leading report on X went ahead and stated. Joe Rogan would have been platforming Kamala Harris.
Preach.
And that says everything you need to know right now. The fact that the LA Times, the Washington Post, numerous stalwart progressive, you can almost guarantee it any time, are going to endorse the Democratic nominee, all started to realize that maybe they were not helping themselves by, playing goalie for the Democrats. And that is causing a day of reckoning within editorial rooms across the United States. Then you go ahead and look at this situation where they cannot argue with the numbers. It's like 72 million people at this point.
Wow.
72 million people voted for Donald Trump. I think the difference is about 5 million votes. Look at New Jersey.
Yes.
Look at Virginia, where the marginal win
should Virginia, by the way, we were watching at home thinking, is Virginia going to go red? What?
Here's the thing. Trump should have lost by 10 points. He lost by less than 5. So really consider that. He went ahead and made gains in Northern Virginia, where Republicans have historically done poorly for the past 20 years. You go ahead.
Why is that, Remso? Why do you think that is? Is it because of this article? Like the reasons that they're articulating? Were people just getting tired of the bullshit?
So I got to give some credit to John Fetterman, because whether he's doing it intentionally or because he's doing it,
Remso, I never thought that was going to be on our bingo card for the end of 2024. Let's give some credit to John Fetterman, which, by the way, does having a stroke cure leftism?
I think it does. I think whenever his brain started receiving oxygen again, he started actually, speaking and thinking about things coherently. But the reason why is because Northern Virginia has been doing what many states have been doing, that lean progressive. What they do is, and we saw this with the voter roll fiasco, where apparently 2,500 voters, known voters who shouldn't even be voters, they self-identified as non-citizens, were kept on the voter rolls. And that's only the number that we know, not the full amount, because a full investigation would take way longer. But what they do is they go ahead and they flooded Northern Virginia with folks from India, Pakistan. You get a lot of Canadians, but the truth is that these folks go to Canada. They live there for a couple of years. They secure passage to the United States. They become residents. They end up, for the ones that become citizens, they end up voting Democrat because, all the subsidies and everything else. And somebody's going to say, that's bullshit. I'm like, oh, look at the population of Northern Virginia. The Korean population, which we saw a big boom when I moved there in 2008, went ahead and basically started getting shoved down. Now we're getting folks from Pakistan coming in, which brings a whole other problem. We've got folks from El Salvador, from Venezuela, from other Central American countries, where you're just like, how did you get here? What are you doing here? Are you working? John Fetterman on Joe Rogan's show a week before the election went ahead and basically admitted that when you're taking folks who are part of this refugee resettlement program and you're sending them to swing states specifically, what you're doing for 4 to 8 years theoretically is you're getting them on the dole. You're giving them very low standards to maintain their status there. You don't expect them to assimilate. You don't expect them to speak English. You put them in our schools. You put them in our system. And then
which, by the way, pause. That is the opposite of when we were in grade school. We were taught, right? We were taught when people came to America, it's a melting pot. Assimilation is wonderful. The opposite is happening.
It's a charcuterie board.
Say it again.
It's a charcuterie board, but somebody shit on the board. and that's not a racial comment. That's a gross analogy. They actively do not
charcuterie board.
They actively do not want to be American. So I grew up in one of the wealthiest towns in the Northern Virginia suburbs called Clifton. And growing up, Clifton was where all the rich white government contractors worked. And what I found over the past 4 years, especially, is that you've got a lot of folks coming in, especially a lot of Arab folks who don't speak English. They don't, they're not friendly to the neighbors. When you say hi to them, they look at you as if you're the problem. The problem is that we're bringing people in who actively just don't like the country. So they see us more as like, a Sheetz gas station where they can litter all over the place and not care because they're never going back there. But in this case, they're not leaving, and they're going ahead and they're taking American dollars and they're sending it off to their ethnic conflict of choice. And then the ones that do get citizenship, they vote to basically go ahead and fleece the native population to go ahead and benefit themselves. It's almost like a reverse colonialism. It's, it's basically passive colonialism. There's no other way to say it. But what they're trying to do right now with Biden, and I'm surprised it hasn't gotten more attention, maybe because he's ignoring Kamala and the other progressives because he's out the door, is they're trying to push through a mass amnesty plan before the end of the year, before everyone goes on recess. And the idea is that you take these 20 million people, the ones that we know of, and you go ahead and you grant them citizenship. And what you do is you flip the populations, you go ahead and add and redistrict congressional districts because of that, changing the complete House of Representatives. And then what you've done is you've basically created a guaranteed class of serfs, almost like Tammany Hall in the East Coast in the New England states, where you're going to go ahead and make them permanently Democrat. And Fetterman was the one who was like, yeah, that is a concern. I'm not saying that's happening, but I'm saying based off what you have just said, Joe Rogan, that makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And that is the problem. And I can't say it's funny enough when I see these white liberals who are like, I can't believe that these Latinos voted for their own deportation. It's like, one, dumbass. One, if we voted, we're American citizens. Two, we're Americans first. We don't really give a shit about our race. You meet any Puerto Rican, we're 7 different shades of Caribbean, man, and that's about it. So you don't get it. We care about taxes. We care about crime. We don't want open borders. We want our schools funded. We want police in our community. We want to actually live in a place where citizens are prioritized over these non-citizens. And that's just it. Like, that used to be your average Republican today has more in common with a Bill Clinton Democrat in 1992 than they do with any of these radical right-wing people that they think. Like, America's Republicans are moderates. That's just it. Like, that's just it.
So really quick to that, right? Does this speak to then, Remso, a greater political realignment, right? Because this article is addressing the elephant in the room, the progressive Democrat elephant donkey in the room. I don't know. When you look at this article, it's highlighting the fact that the Democratic Party understands, or at least some folks in the Democratic Party look at the outcomes and they're saying this didn't work. Our approach to going after these targeted identity groups, right? And then with that, building on this, this narrative against the other identity groups, that doesn't sell anymore. And what Trump's been able to do, and by the way, I've seen a lot of pushback from folks on the right who are looking at this coalition of folks that Trump's brought together, and they're like, oh, so you like RFK now? Wasn't he just saying that, if you don't think global warming's real, you should go to jail?
Cry more, motherfuckers. Cry more.
Well, let's address it, right? Like, the fact that Trump has been able to bring together such a group of folks. Sorry. You liked that, huh?
It was like a here's my moment.
And I almost voted for him until you gave me the heads up that he was endorsing Trump. But no, seriously, like, when you look at folks like Tulsi Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy, Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, these folks, if you were to rewind 10 years ago, all over the demographic maps, right? Elon Musk, he's an entrepreneur. He's doing a lot of crazy stuff in the world of EVs and space travel. And then you have Tulsi Gabbard. She's all about foreign policy. RFK talking about health solutions and the poisons in our food and the poisons in our vaccines, which is not to say he thinks all vaccines are bad. He's saying, let's look at the things that are in the vaccines that maybe don't need to be there. So this is the coalition that Trump has built. And it is not the Republican Party of 2012. It's not the Republican Party of 2016. Remso, it's not even the Republican Party of 2020. So I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the realignment happen in the GOP. I think we're going to start seeing something happen in the Democratic Party. And this actually is a good segue because I do want to share this tab here. This is our buddy Austin Peterson's article over at AMP America, and talking about how, like, Trump, Milei, and Musk are these guys the catalyst to a greater liberty in our era. And I think it goes to kind of the idea that, okay, maybe the Republican Party has coalesced around this liberty message, and then, Remso, on the other side of the aisle, it seems like the Democratic Party is coalescing around a big fat question mark. So is this the beginning of a true American political realignment? And what does it look like, 4 years, 8 years, 12 years from now?
I think people need to stop thinking that, the fight is over. And what we really need to do is we need to make as many changes to the federal government as possible. And then we need to solidify that with, and I don't say a 4-year, I say an 8-year additional Republican presidency. Because that's the only way you can actually begin to reverse the course of these behaviors. Because we go ahead and we see what Obama did in 8 years of getting really whatever he wanted. And people talk about, well, lame duck Obama 2012 through 2016 didn't do a lot. He did a lot. He was appointing judges like crazy. He was fundraising for the next slate of Democratic candidates who were running for 2016, already focusing on 2018. He was writing executive orders that solidified a lot of really bad tendencies. And Obama was thinking past himself. Not a lot of leaders in the White House really do that. They do to an extent, but Obama, to give him credit, really understood that a lot of this stuff could be reversed. Now, luckily, we had a Donald Trump whose biggest accomplishment twice has been making Obama completely irrelevant. But we've seen what happens when you get somebody who's willing to match that tenacity and do what Joe Biden did in just his first year, where he wasn't even being selective about the stuff that he was reversing from Trump. He was outright throwing things away. He threw our energy policy in the dustbin. He went ahead and threw our foreign policy in the dustbin. He enabled Iran. He went ahead and took away all the funding to fight human trafficking. Now human trafficking in the United States is at the worst level it's ever been historically. So, we see what happens when you match somebody with their opposite counterpart.
Yep.
We need 12 years. We need 12 years of a Republican presidency just to move back a little bit, just a little bit past this, because we went from we don't want to socialize healthcare to socialize healthcare. We went from we just want gay people to get married to cut your kid's dick off. We went from all of this shit, which was like no one was really arguing about, to where we are now, where it's like, allow non-citizens to vote. The fact that in Wisconsin, and there were several other states that did this, the fact that here we actually had to vote on basically codifying the language in our Constitution to say that only U.S. citizens can vote. The fact that we had to have a discussion on that. You bring this up to anybody 20 years ago, Democrat, Republican, they'd be like, you have to be a citizen to vote. Who's arguing this? The Democrats. To your question, though, Brian, I think a lot of people are missing an opportunity here. I don't want the Democrat Party to reform. I don't want the Democrat Party to reel back. I want the Democrat Party to fall apart, disband, and go away forever. They're a pariah. And this isn't me just saying pro-Republican stuff. This is me basically saying that when we go ahead and look at who is actively always pushing against the interest of the average citizen, the Republican Party has faults. But as you mentioned, this is not the old Republican Party. I will give this a chance, because from where they are now to where they were even 10 years ago is a total 180. Like, they sound more like Ron Paul than ever before, and we should celebrate that. But no, I don't want the Democrat Party to reform. I won't even think about the conversation of what they should do. I don't want them to do anything. I want them to fall apart and to disband and to run away and to stop this shit. Am I saying I want a one-party state? No, but if the Democrats were to split into multiple parties, the crazy freaking communists, and then like the normal people that just want to, take union money, I don't care. But it's got to be shattered and broken into a million pieces and cast in the wind. We cannot play nice with them at this point. We've got to destroy the Democratic Party financially. We got to destroy them in morale. We got to destroy them electorally. We cannot ever allow them to behave the way that they have for so long, especially the last 4 years. They're anti-American.
Remso, I can't agree more. And with that, we're going to listen to a quick ad from one of our awesome sponsors. This is Cardio Miracle. Yes, we are airing from our Cardio Miracle studios here in lovely Eastern Indiana. Folks, if you want the best heart health supplement in the world, well, go ahead, take a listen. Hey, folks, I want to take a moment to talk about something that has truly changed my life, and that is Cardio Miracle, our incredible studio sponsor. Now, I'll be honest, when I first heard about Cardio Miracle and their claims about improving heart health, I was skeptical. But after using it for just about 2 months, I was absolutely blown away by the results. First, my blood pressure went from being consistently around 140/90 to a much more healthier and manageable 120/80. And my resting heart rate dropped from the low 70s to the high 50s. And I couldn't believe it. But the benefits didn't stop there. I started sleeping better, and I felt more energized at the gym, and my heart felt the best it's felt in years. And it's not just me. Hundreds of you, our amazing listeners, have reached out to share your own incredible experiences with Cardio Miracle. So, what is Cardio Miracle, and how does it work? It's a carefully crafted supplement that harnesses the power of nitric oxide to support optimal heart function. So by increasing nitric oxide levels in your blood, Cardio Miracle helps relax your blood vessels, improve circulation, and it protects your heart from damage. It's like giving your heart the support it needs to function at its best. And here's the best part. We've got an exclusive offer just for you, our loyal listeners here at The Brian Nichols Show. When you head over to cardiomiracle.com and use code TBNS at checkout, you'll get an extra 15% discount on your order. Plus, with their 100% money-back guarantee, you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. So, if you're ready to take control of your heart health and experience the life-changing benefits of Cardio Miracle for yourself, just click the link in the show notes or video description. Trust me, your heart will thank you. And don't wait another day to prioritize your health. Join the tens of thousands of folks who have already discovered the Cardio Miracle difference. Head to cardiomiracle.com now and use code TBNS for 15% off your order. Your journey to a happier and healthier heart starts today. And now, let's get back to the show. It's me. I'm Brian and Remso. We're here on our week in review part of AMP America, airing on the Brian Nichols Show. Love it. Hey, folks, we're live on Twitter. We're having some fun today. And with that, and if you've been joining us here today, you've been hearing how not only have we seen the Democratic Party facing kind of a restructure, we're hearing right now a realignment, politically speaking. But Remso, let's address the biggest elephant in the room, and that is what just happened, right? And I want to take a step back here because I almost feel that we're jumping past what an amazing accomplishment we just watched happen over the past how many months of just a stellar ground game, a stellar strategy. And you mentioned earlier one of the names, the organizations that helped make this election possible, and that's Turning Point USA. And with that, the head of Turning Point, Charlie Kirk. I know Charlie gets a lot of shit, and a lot of that shit is undeserved. Charlie is one of the smartest dudes in the world of politics. And you know what he's been doing, what Cliff Maloney's been doing, what Scott Pressler's been doing. They made the ground game, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the country possible. So Charlie was over on Patrick Bet-David's podcast, PBD, and he was there with Chris Cuomo, which still kind of wrapping my head around the attempted rebirth of Chris Cuomo. Earmuffs for kids. Fuck that guy, because he was one of the leading proponents of all the insane hysteria back during the COVID lockdowns. But that's a different conversation. I've had many
coming back, and if he didn't change his tune, he'd get deported too.
Right back to it, Italy.
Send him to Antarctica. He's out.
Oh, I'm just thinking poor Fredo. That's all. Am I allowed to say Fredo? Is that insulting to him? Sorry if it is. But with over on that show, the PBD podcast, Charlie Kirk went through and he very articulately mapped out what happened, how this strategy was able to not just take place, but actually have the success. So, and by the way, we are live over on X. So thank you to all the folks who are joining us today on our Saturday morning week in review part of AMP America and the Brian Nichols Show. Let's go ahead and check out this quick video here with our good buddy. I say good buddy. He follows me on Twitter, Charlie Kirk. And let me share here. All right, let's take a listen.
So when I had the president, he asked him a question. I said, so undecided voters. And he says, there's no undecided voters at this point. I'm like, huh, okay, interesting. So when he say there's no undecided voters at this point, I think there's probably some, but I want to know, what do you mean by that? What? Let me ask the question. I really want both of you guys to give me your feedback. I'm going to come to you first. So was it more there is not undecided voters versus no? How can you activate this audience to come out and vote that they typically don't? It goes from 13 to 16%. How can I activate these guys that are like, yeah, I'm not interested in voting, to go out there? And like, I had Eddie Hearn on yesterday, one of the greatest boxing promoters of all time, right? And Eddie said, you know, he had a fight where I'm like, what's the biggest loss he ever had? He says, there was this fight, I thought we were going to kill it. He says, it was a fight. It was one of the best fights for the 5% of super fans that actually follow boxing technically. But he says, not for the other guys that are just wanting to see a good fight, not the 95%. And he says, my job as a promoter.
Which, by the way, this is us, right? We're in the world of politics. This is the behind the scenes stuff that really matters to us. But I think it's important to understand the context that PBD is laying out here. This is definitely behind the weeds. This is definitely, you know, the peek behind the curtain. But it's so, so important.
To activate you based on a story that I sell that you want to come see that fight, right? How much of it is undecided voters? How much of it is activating new audience that was going to sit this out to come out and say, oh, hell no, I'm going to come support this guy? Which one?
Really quick, right? This is something I've been bitching and moaning about for years. with a libertarian party? Are you talking to the true believers, or are you trying to grow the market share, right? My day job, I'm in the world of contact center sales, right? My company, we made a conscious effort not to go after the folks who are already being gone after. So you look at the 30% of the market share, that's 5,000 contact center seats or above, right? That's your tried and true call centers, contact centers. They're already bought into the solution. But what about that 70% market share? Who's going after them? What about the 50% market share that's less than 1,000 contact center seats or below, right? Who's going after those guys? Or do they even have a contact center, right? This is the mentality that we use in the world of business. We call it going after gray space. And what autistic libertarians do is they say, oh, true believer, let me sell to them. Sorry, they already believe you. So this strategy that Patrick Bet-David is articulating here, this is the strategy that works and did work in this past election. Let's listen to what Charlie has to say and how it worked.
What do you think it is?
So in election, there's two types of elections. There's persuasion elections, and then there's turnout elections. And turnout elections typically are midterms, or they are one-off and special elections. This is the first presidential election since probably 2016, but that was a different issue where it was pure turnout, where there were because everyone really had their mind made up on Donald Trump largely. However, I disagree. There were still some late breakers and undecided people. I do think that pool was less than 2%, though. I think so. Donald Trump
2% is a lot, though.
And Donald Trump's campaign strategy, of which we helped execute on the ground in some of these states, was that, guys, don't spend your time knocking on doors about a suburban soccer mom who's weighing her options. Instead, because that takes 9 contacts to try to get her. 9 points of contact on average. Conversations, discussions, and they could be 30 minutes on it. Instead, turning point, go spend your time in very Republican areas where there are non-registered or what we call disengaged voters. People that like Trump, like his worldview. For example,
really quick, what do we talk about? And again, just go back, folks, to the archives of past episodes where I've gone through and talk about sales, right? It's not a matter of going after folks who are overtly libertarian or folks who are ambivalent to libertarianism. It's who are the folks that already kind of have libertarian-ish sentiments, right? And how can you activate them? This is literally the approach I have been fucking screaming at this microphone for years at this point, trying to get libertarians to wake up to, but they need to have that, again, collective jerk or a circle of jerks who are just sitting there patting each other on the back. But this right here, Remso, this is what's been driving me crazy with libertarians, and this is what Charlie had for success. I see you want to jump in there. Jump in.
Yeah. I mean, to say what to kind of repeat it in like marketing terms, what you just explained, I'd rephrase it in another way for marketing clients, which where you have three groups of people. The people who will never like you if they know you. The people that are obviously supporting you and you don't need to convince them. And then the people that would support you if they simply knew what you were calling them to do, or if they knew you existed. Those are the people that I want to go ahead and bring in because they require the least amount of time, the least amount of money, the least amount of effort. I would rather spend time in that camp than just feeding the people who have already kind of capped out what they're going to, buy or purchase from me lifetime wise. And then the people that are never going to spend $1 with me. It's Dr. Pepper people who will never buy Coke or Pepsi. It's Democrats who will never vote Republican. It's McDonald's people who will never buy Burger King. Am I going to do that? Or am I going to get at the people who want a burger, but I have to remind them that McDonald's exists? Those are the people I'm going to spend a majority of my time on.
Preach. Let's keep listening.
A bro vote, right? And so this is where we spent our time, and we harvested, not ballot harvested, but we harvested in a very, very powerful way. At Arizona State University, for example, we registered thousands of young men to vote in fraternities. And that was way easier than us going to try to win over swing voters. And we did a little bit of that, but generally the Trump campaign was brilliant because they threw the Republican consultant playbook out. The Republican consultant playbook was spend all your time on the middle, on those like middle 15% swing voters and go all in. Trump campaign said, why don't we just make our base bigger? Why don't we just make the people who love us the most? And so what they looked at was demographics. And they realized if we can make the electorate 3% more masculine and by the way, they were so smart to do this.
This is Susie?
This is Susie and James Blair and La Savita. And they were so smart because they said, wait a second, what is more important than race? Whether or not you're a man or a woman actually dictates your political affiliation far more of a correlation than your race. So they de-emphasized racial politics and they emphasized more of a masculine machismo approach. And boy, did it work. And not only did it work, you're running up against a woman. So it's easier to kind of make that argument. And so I don't mean to monopolize the time. But
this is really interesting. Keep going.
And so
I love the fact that Chris Cuomo's like, holy shit, this is actually opening my eyes. Is this how politics
Chris
actually
Cuomo
works?
conceded talking time to listen.
and
what
what
most reporters should do.
Exactly. If you lost, this is what you should be doing. And by the way, just before we continue, because there's a little bit more here, Charlie wraps up. I know we're letting Charlie talk a lot here this episode, but this is just so important for anybody in the world of politics to understand. What did Charlie just talk about, Remso? Not trying to go after the 15% of folks who said, yes, I'm going to vote and I'm undecided. It's saying we have a base of customers who love us. Why don't we try to sell to more of them when there is, in fact, more of them to be reached? And that's what they did. They doubled down. They said, this is the voter who's embracing us, and this is the voter who has not been embraced for, at this point, years, right? So, of course, it makes sense to wrap your arms around them and to activate them, which is exactly what the Trump campaign did, and it led to positive outcomes. How about that?
I was very confused of Turning Point when I was a college student. I remember being very critical of them and in a snarky way sometimes too, because I didn't understand what the long goal was. And the long goal was make politics fun, bring in the people that already kind of agree with you and get them active. But the big thing that Turning Point did, and I've seen it really as I'm turning 30 next month, like, I have more in common with somebody in their 40s now than I do with somebody in college, which is really kind of shocking to me. But like, I've met a lot of people my age who are Turning Point alumni, or, they're Young Americans for Liberty alumni or Students for Liberty alumni. And the idea is like, did you keep those people involved? Did you keep those people actively pushing the conservative agenda with their votes, with how they spend their money, with how they, discuss things with people? And Turning Point has really done that. And I think they've definitely had some pivot points like any organization. But what we're seeing now with how they've really just been able to say, listen, we're big tent. And some people like our people, some people won't. We'll agree sometimes, we won't agree otherwise. It's about getting people involved, and it's about making freedom fun again. And I think I was too literal back in college in my like staunch libertarian days, and I didn't take them seriously. I took them literally, I didn't take them seriously. Now I think the world needs to understand that you have to take them seriously because the results speak for themselves. If you told me that hot sorority chicks would be making reels of themselves wearing MAGA hats and posting online, like, oh my gosh, like, I would never have imagined that in a million years. But it took a lot of effort, and it took basically a single generation, the younger millennial to older Gen Z crowd, 94 to 2002 mostly. It took really targeting that and honing on the message and getting them out. And I think that what he said, the machismoism, that's been under attack by, that bitch Nikki Haley, I'm sorry, and others. And it got to the point where I was talking.
Remso, I mean, your train of thought, but think about the ad that you and I dissected back 3-4 weeks ago. With,
the guys who are gonna
full-throatedly endorsing Kamala
endorsement. I think that what we have been under attack by for the last, I'll say 40 years, going back to the 80s, has been nerd propaganda.
Yep.
And I say this specifically because of who the villains and who the heroes were of 2020. It was the gym bros. It was the healthy people. It was the
crunchy
business
moms,
owners, the crunchy moms, all the people who we were told were dumb and evil in movies ended up being the good guys. But what was it always in movies? Like Attack of the Nerds and everything else. It was always
the theater kids.
It was meek, depressed theater kids who are nerds, who are being bullied by everyone else. And I mean, I say this as somebody that got bullied a lot in middle school and high school and stuff, honestly. And I can say this honest to God, it was never the jocks. it was never the nerds. I'm not saying that didn't exist for people. Bullying comes on all ends, but largely enough, the people that were telling you to put on a mask, close your business down, take the shot, you don't deserve to vote, you don't deserve to be a functioning member of society, they were all the creepy nerds. It was the Faucis. And those people are the first people to fold to tyranny whenever things get slightly tough. And they're the first people to push it the moment they have power, because it's always these people that don't have power who end up abusing it. But it's the people who have power and understand its devastation on people who respect it the most.
They're morally bankrupt and weak people. When you are you create this victimhood mentality, right? And you create this utopian vision of what should be versus the meritocratic real life solutions that we know work, right? That is where I see a lot of this divide come down to, Remso. Because I lived in the world of both the jocks and the theater kid, right? I was the guy who would go and play nose tackle for my football team and sack the quarterback 6 times in the game. And then the next day, I'm on stage doing the lead role for a musical in school, right? I played both roles, and I got to see firsthand the guys I played football with, even though, yeah, we would rib each other, we would have a lot of fun, we would get aggressive with each other sometimes, there was an understanding of real life boundaries, right? Like you take your, oh man, I could really knock that guy out, to that guy that you said you could knock out, or that guy you're shit talking, he is literally standing in front of you right now, and he's going to get like aggressive with you. If you're playing a game of football and you're shit talking somebody, and they're maybe they're a linebacker and you're the quarterback and you're shit talking, guess who's going to have more of an incentive to hit you as hard as possible, right? But in theater, or in this kind of this feminized type of approach to interactions, and this really was what we've seen over the past how many years in internet culture, is that you can have the most beta bitch theater kid nerd video game streamer, whatever it may be, sit there on the computer and behind the confines of that screen feel so confident and so unrealistically brave and bold in their proclamations. They're going after people like the crunchy moms, like the fitness bros, all the people we mentioned thereafter, right? And they create this fake, safe, squishy online world. It's why we're watching right now as lots of these lefty loonies are leaving X and going to platforms like Blue Sky or Threads, right? Because they can't deal with real life. If there's somebody who doesn't agree with me, it's because they're a bad person, right? So I need to go to a place where only people who think like me can interact. I personally enjoy Twitter for the back and forth, for the debate, for the dialogue, because that's real life, right? If you go to a room and every room you go to, everybody just agrees with you, that's not real life. And yet we've seen this fake mentality, this theater kid mentality, this nerd mentality of, well, this is the play that we do, right? This is what we can create on stage with art. And then the nerd saying, well, we can overcome meritocracy with whatever things we're creating in the nerd realm. That's fine. That's all well and good. But you're still living in the real world. You're still here. You have to interact with real people.
The nerds have shown that they're the true villains of the 21st century. It's just true. There's no freaking way around it. I actively remember how I was because I hung out with my own nerd group, but my best friend ever is he was a D1 lacrosse player. And I kind of look at it, and he was kind of nerdy too, but it was who was really the people who were going after each other? It was the cliques where they could form their own little hierarchy and kind of go after people. The jocks didn't have time to do that. They didn't have time. There were too many eyes on them, because if they did act out, there would be instant repercussions.
Yep.
And it was one of the situations where it's no wonder they don't want to have anything to do with us nerds. We're all in kind of our own little fantasy realm, and they're discussing, who's going to who's going to be the prom king, who's going to play what in school, what are they actually going to do on their trips and vacations and their weekend parties and stuff like that. Like they were very much focused on like real things. And we were all kind of focused on just kind of like our insular little nerd subculture, which, you know, like I say, this is an active comic book collector. I kind of get why you would not want to spend time with the nerds. I kind of get why you kind of look at them and you're just like, you're kind of fucking weird. Like I kind of look at people like that now. I'm like, you're an adult and you spend like 7 hours a day playing video games,
or you sit there and you're ranting and raving about how wonderful anime and stuff is. Like,
I actually think that video gamers are losers. I'm like, real life is a freaking video game with like real repercussions. Like, you know, it's one of the situations where I'm like, get away, nerd. Like, you're not doing anything for the world. You're not doing anything for yourself. Like, get away from me. Like, I get it now. I really get it now.
Yep. All right, let's listen to the rest of what Charlie has to say here, and then we'll go ahead and bring things home.
You ever see the righteous gemstones of Uncle Baby Billy?
No.
Step off, nerd. Get your nerd shit away from me.
Send it to me in a link. We'll play it before we wrap up.
I'll do it.
Trump campaign then did it. The Republican consultant playbook that Karl Rove basically authored was everything is about high propensity. So there's two types of voters: high propensity and low propensity voters. A high propensity voter is typically college educated, lives in the suburbs. You know, they watch Chris, they watch CNN. They have an income over $100,000 a year. They have 2 kids and a picket fence, and they go to soccer games and they don't commit crimes. You know, that type of demo, right? High propensity voters is where the Republican Party has always been focused. Okay, but Trump came in and he said, no. We're going to focus on low propensity voters. The welder, the electrician, the carpenter, the police officer, or the person that's just not registered to vote. Where I thought that Donald Trump was going to win, and I wasn't as confident as anybody else, okay, was when I started to see the voter registration surge across the country. In the summer before this last summer, new people that were registering to vote were registering at a clip 3-1 versus Democrat. In Pennsylvania, for the first time ever, in Pennsylvania, for the first time ever, we had every county in Pennsylvania, we were out registering Democrats for the first time ever. Now, mind you, what Josh Shapiro did as governor of Pennsylvania is he put in a thing called motor voter, which means you automatically get registered to vote. They thought that was going to help Democrats.
When you get your license.
When you get your driver's license. It helped Republicans because of think about who's not registered to vote. It's typically lower propensity voters. And PBD, here's the kicker. Where do these people get their information? Yes. Lower propensity voters get information on TikTok. Mm-hmm. They're not watching CNN. They're not sitting. You know why? These folks are darn tired by the time they get home. They're not turning on cable news. They're watching NFL football games. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that are not going to be able to quote to you, Marbury. They're not.
Strategy.
By the way,
it's also this.
Yeah, it's also the phone. So what Donald Trump campaign did is they hacked the 2024 election, not in a way that people would think, where they said, wait a second, everyone has a supercomputer in the right-hand pocket. Why are we worried about what CNN is saying or MSNBC is saying? Why don't we win the information war? And then finally, the kicker, they said, why don't we go on the most ambitious, over-the-top, low-propensity voter communication strategy on Theo Von, Joe Rogan, Nelk Boys, Logan Paul, influencer strategies, right? And so what they said is there's this whole reservoir.
Freaking brilliant.
And the final kicker, my mandate at Turning Point was very simple. Charlie, turn Trump supporters into voters. And that's what we did.
By the way, Newsweek.
So that's it, right? And I know there's a lot we listened to from Charlie, but I thought it was so important to take a step back, right? Remove the emotion from the politics for a second and just put on our analytical hats for a hot second. What Charlie just articulated is exactly the reason Trump won. You can go into the assassination attempts. You can go into the just horrible debate performance by Joe Biden. You can talk about inflation. You can talk about the economy. You can talk about Ukraine. You can talk about Gaza and Israel. You can go through all of these bed bug issues, which is important. However, who are the people that we need to mobilize, right? It's not the true believers. It's not the folks who listen to PBD every day. It's not the folks who listen to Tim Pool every day. It's not the folks who listen to name your favorite political podcast, right? Dave Smith, Jason Stapleton. Well, he doesn't do a show anymore. But, name your favorite podcaster, right? Those folks are already going to vote, most likely, right? But to the point, you need to take the person who is maybe not even a supporter, someone who is just more leaning your way for whatever reason, and get them excited at the prospects of voting for that candidate. And that's exactly what the Trump campaign did. They went on podcasts. Kamala Harris's campaign waited until the last second to try and go on podcasts. And what happened when she did? She went on podcasts that were speaking to the true believers, right? Nobody who listens to Call Her Daddy was going to be having their mind change when they hear Kamala Harris talk. They were already going to be voting for Kamala, right? And maybe there's a few that were on the fence, but that's like a teeny tiny little percentage, right? When you look at the Theo Von audiences, right? The Andrew Schultz audiences, when you look at Joe Rogan's audiences, these audiences are incredibly diverse and overtly, in most cases, non-political, right? They discuss current events or topics of the day, but maybe not through a specific political lens. And that is exactly why Trump won, because Trump spoke to the people who were listening and heard something that they were like, ooh, there's value here. They're meeting me where I'm at, Mr. Voter, Mrs. Voter, who maybe was undecided or not even undecided, just ambivalent, right? And now I have a motivation. Now I am excited to go and vote because, and this is what the number one thing that we heard from young folks, right? They would listen to those podcasts. And what did they say, Remso? They just feel like a real person. They feel like they could sit down and have a conversation for a couple hours, whereas Kamala just felt like she had her 20-minute teleprompter that was already pulled up, and she can only talk about that set of issues. And even if you ask her more nuanced questions around those issues, you get the, well, I grew up in a middle-class family, and I know the hopes, dreams, and aspirations. That shit just, that put people to sleep. It turned them off because we get it. You're fake. You're not real. You have nothing original to say. This right
Tim
here
Walz didn't
wins.
turn out the bro vote.
Did you hear by the way, did you hear the rumors? I'm not leading with this as fact, but the rumors are post-mortem Kamala campaign, Tim Walz wasn't even the number 1 choice. He wasn't even the number 2 choice. He was like the number 10 choice. Apparently Kamala had gone out, asked folks like Josh Shapiro, Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, like all of these noted figures in the Democratic Party being like, hey, you want to be my VP? And they're all like, dude, fuck off. Absolutely not. I am not putting my brand with you cackling thing. Like, we're not doing this. And the only guy who would be like, yeah, I'm Tim Walz. I love China. So like, that's what happened, right? Apparently, the rumor is that she couldn't even get the top tier folks behind the scenes in the Democratic Party because they were so afraid.
It's this is your whole thing, Brian. Meet voters where they are, talk to the things that they care about. It is telling that 500,000 voters went and voted for RFK, and that a person who was not running and that a person who had actively endorsed a previous opponent did better than the Libertarian Party candidate.
Yep.
Donald Trump had all of us. Chase Oliver had X spaces with Hody Johns. Really think about that. And that's just it. And I say this now because I still get the comments. I still get the replies. If you are actively doing anything, if you are giving any time to the Libertarian Party, any time or money, you are retarded. It's over. The experiment is done. There's no more guessing. There's no more wondering. There's no more what if. There is the world pre-internet and there is the world post-internet. There is the world pre-9/11. There is the world post-9/11. This is the world post-2024.
Well, I would even go back one more. There's a world pre-COVID and there's the world post-COVID.
Yes.
COVID was, Remso, and I'm not trying to like crap on what you just said, but COVID was, I think, the most radicalizing thing we have seen in the American electorate in generations. Like, think about the fact that the COVID pandemic literally impacted everyone in some way, shape, or form, right? Whether you were terrified of it, you had to watch, being forced to mask or vaccinate to go to your job, using the vaccine passports, having your neighbors look at you like you're leading the Third Reich because you're not wearing a mask outside. Like, these are all things your average person had to deal with. And you don't just forget that, right? Like, if you were a business owner and your business got shut down because government mandate saying you're not an essential business, You think that maybe sticks with a family who watched their livelihoods collapse, and all of a sudden maybe a dad who was building something great to give to their kids, and all of a sudden it's just gone like that because some fucking bureaucrat says so. Like, that's what radicalized people, and that was all during COVID.
Yeah.
I'm obviously still radicalized, in case people are wondering.
Oh yeah, I mean, my entire life, I was on the Expat Money Show, this week, and I said, after COVID, I made a promise to myself, which was never again, and never again means now, and I'm never gonna be locked down. I'm never gonna let these people victimize me again. And this is just it now. Like, the world post 2024 now politically is different. There's no more playing on the sidelines. There's no more rejecting the reality which we see, which is the Republican Party is the populist working class party that is oriented on doing what's best for American citizens and protecting American civil liberties. The Democratic Party is openly full of communists who are not working for the benefit of American citizens. And the Libertarian Party is for people who do not take things seriously. They don't.
This is what Remso wants to say to all those folks in the Libertarian Party.
Go outside, nerd. Get out. Go. I ain't got time to be distracted by your worthless chime-ins. Go on. Go outside, nerd.
Yes. Can you save that from now on forever? Because we're just going to keep referencing that.
1,000%. This is going to go into the archive of video clips that we'll toss in here during our shows.
Oh, that's my thing now. That's my gimmick now. Get on, nerd.
Go outside.
I don't need your useless chime-ins.
Well, and here, Remso, as we wrap things up, this kind of goes back to what I've been trying to articulate here in the show for a number of years now. There are the folks who are acknowledging politics and the way it impacts our real lives in the real world. And then there are the folks who play politics, right? COVID, it was the moment where I looked at the folks playing politics and I said, all right, time to shit or get off the pot. Your ideas of personal liberty, personal autonomy, government overreach, all right, let's put them to the test. Watch this. Watch Mr. and Mrs. Government bureaucrat trying to force you to mask up just because they said so, forcing you to get vaccinated when you work for an employer with over 1,000 employees because OSHA says so. Like, stand up, fight back. And then what do we see, Remso? We saw the useful idiots, right? And I'm Chase right here. Chase Oliver. Hi. Oh, I'm wearing my mask at my Thanksgiving get together with less than 7 people. Yay! Congratulations. You proved the point. When you were hit with the ultimate test, you failed. You did bad. Nobody trusts you anymore, except for the folks who are true believers like you. And regardless of whatever you see in the real world, they're going to live in this fantasy nerd world, theater world that you have contrived. I'm sorry. I'm done with folks playing politics. I've said this a million times for the show. If you view political engagement and success as being the secretary for your local LP affiliate, sorry, you're playing politics. And I really don't take you seriously because you're not making any real substantive changes. I did this little test, Remso. I said, what would be the best way to actually reach new people? If you had a person who is politically agnostic and you're trying to get them interested in the world of politics from a libertarian perspective, what's going to have more of a positive outcome? Going to a talk with Dave Smith, sitting down with Vivek Ramaswamy, talking about the very real political issues of the day and how we're actually going to accomplish like real solutions to help fix those problems? Or are you going to bring your friend who, again, politically agnostic, to your local LP affiliate meeting with a bunch of, goofballs like Gandor, the Gollum or whatever, and he's going to be wearing his little LARPing outfit? Like, is that going to get that person interested when you're sitting there talking about, all these very, very detailed, just dense political, libertarian, philosophical questions and topics? The answer's clear. You should, if you're listening to this today and that kind of hits you like, oh, he's talking about me. Good. Wake up, because it doesn't work. COVID broke this. And frankly, nobody else out there in respectable society is looking at what you're doing in these little echo chambers as productive. And as a matter of fact, they think you're goofballs and they're not going to pay attention to you, because when you do goofball shit, people they're just going to tune out. They're not going to pay attention. So, libertarians, if you want to have a seat at the table and actually impact real life policy that's going to impact you today, your neighbors today, and tomorrow, it's time to stop playing politics. It's time to start actually engaging in real life politics. Remso, that's my final thoughts for today. What say you?
Go away, nerds. We're done with you and your useless bullshit.
Get out. Go. I ain't got time to be distracted by your worthless chime-ins. Go on. Go outside, nerd.
There you go. All right, Remso. I love you, buddy. It's been great to have you back. I'm so glad you're safe and sound. Glad you're not heading to prison with a bunch of my other friends. So that's a positive too. And with that, folks, thank you for joining us here on another AMP America Week in Review. We've had a couple hundred
not
folks
going to prison. Of all the things in my life I ever thought I would hear, is that
Remso did it. He avoided jail time.
we're not going. No, we're going back. We're going back. It was the whole, we're not going back. It's like, we're going back. We're going back.
With that being said, we love you guys. Thank you for joining us on your Saturday mornings. If you're catching this after the fact, yes, we are streaming live on Saturday morning over on X. So if you want to join the conversation, toss your thoughts into the chats when we are live streaming, head over to X. You can find me at B Nichols Liberty. Find Remso at Hey Remso on X. Go Remso over on Instagram. And of course, go ahead, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcasting platforms like YouTube Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on your favorite video platforms like Rumble, YouTube, and elsewhere. And one final plug, please go ahead and give us some love at briannicholsshow.com. We have almost 1,000 episodes here of the show going back to 2018 and up to today. And we've had some amazing guests all over the political spectrum. So if you want to hear some of those old episodes, briannicholsshow.com. Give us a 5-star rating and review while you're there. That helps the show reach more folks, and I appreciate it more than words can say. Other than that, folks, we're going to go ahead and put a pin in this week's Week in Review. With that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for Remso Martinez. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.